Hey, this is Holiday Calder reporting in. I thought it would be a good time to do a Wooting ATHE update. Now, for how long has it been that you have heard about the Wooting ATHE update? On this update, I thought it would be a good idea to specifically jump into what I covered in the other update of the 6ATHE V2 concerning the Wooting ATHE Black Zinc case and some very few users encountering what we call the blistering issue, which is basically the black coating blistering slightly and eventually peeling off. And that happening with very, very few users. Today, I'm going to dig deeper into this and go a little bit into the things that we do before we get the product on the market, how we've been investigating this issue overall, and what you can expect going forward for the ATHE specifically, because I think that is something that is missing in the other update, and it would be really great for you if you have this case to know about this. And if you have this case and you are running in this specific issue, do reach out to customer service, because we are here to help you and make sure that you have a fully functioning Wooting ATHE at all times. So, are we ready to dig a little bit deeper and learn a bit more about blistering? I am, because I'm sweating my ass off outside in the sun. It's really hot here. Let's move. All right. So let's start off with what do we do to make sure that all our products come to the market and we can rely on it, we can trust it, and we can make sure that there's no issue with the product during long use. Now, obviously, as you can imagine, we can't have our product manufactured and then throw it on the market for 2 years and then know it's going to last for 2 years and then send it over. So what you do is you run a whole bunch of tests that are more aggressive or more extreme situations to simulate a certain scenario or to accelerate certain processes of wear or tear or corrosion in this case, for example, or anything that really can tell you a bit more about how good the quality is and how resistant it is, so that you also have a measure point to then say, well, when we did the test, it had this amount of days, hours, or times that it would happen. We make some improvements, then we test it again. Did that increase or decrease? And then you know if there's an improvement actually made. There are a whole bunch of standard tests that we go through with every product. But if we look at the case specifically, these are the tests that we're interested in. The first test is the salt spray test. Now, this is a very interesting test. It's literally what it sounds like. We have a chamber, salt water gets sprayed on the case. It just sits there for 48 hours or 72 hours, depending on the requirement. And that is something that we specifically also did with the metal cases. That was for the raw case, one of the most important tests, because when we didn't coat the case, it would fill in this test very, very fast. But by adding a UV coating on the outside, it would pass this test and it was good enough to go. But that's not all. We also need to not just look at the salt piece, we also need to look at chemicals that have maybe acidity in it. And specifically something like Coca-Cola. Now, it might surprise you or not, but Coca-Cola has a lot of acidity inside that is getting masked by a lot of sugars. So that's one of the best chemical tests also on the case. So you have literally droplets of Coke, but also vegetable oil, hand lotion, tea, anything that you might have around that could get on the case to see if it stains, to see if the coating deteriorates, or anything else that can impact the coating. So ideally, if this test, nothing happens at all. Now, that was also the case for the Black Zinc. It also passed. Then we also have the bowl drop test. The bowl drop test is kind of literally what it is also. We have a long tube where you put a bowl on top of into the tube, then it goes through the tube down and drops on the case. That's right. And you do that one to see if the bowl drop causes any kind of dents onto the case. Now, you set the requirements based on how high, from which height do you let the bowl drop onto the case. Then we have the abrasion test. Now, abrasion is basically wear and tear. So you literally have a machine that is rubbing against the surface of the case. And then after an X amount of cycles of rubbing against the case, you look at the result. Now, based on the amount of cycles and the result being that either the coating is worn out or disappeared or maybe more polished, that's where you set the requirement and the standard. So we have a certain standard where we expect it to not be off the case, of course, and where we want it also not to be completely looking polished or anything like that. So that is something that the Black Zinc also goes through. then we have also the alcohol test. Now, alcohol is a very strong chemical and it's very often used for cleaning. So if you're cleaning the case with an alcohol wipe or some kind of liquid imbued with alcohol, we want to make sure that it doesn't remove the paint or cause any kind of damage on the case. So that's an important one. We also have a adhesion test. Adhesion means the stickiness of the coating to the surface. Now, the adhesion is very important because that prevents chipping of the paint or chipping of the coating from the case. The way they test this is by having a very strong tape or different levels of tape and the adhesion of that tape to the coating. You stick it onto the surface, you remove it from the surface, and if the paint sticks to the tape, then you know that the adhesion of the coating to the metal surface in this case is not good enough. But that's also where you can set the requirement. And finally, and you might know this one, the White Zinc V1 version, where we had this like gray mark stuff, we added a new test at that time also, which is called the pencil hardness test, where we literally have pencils of one specific brand with different hardness, and we go over the surface of the case and then see if it leaves any kind of scratch mark behind. Now, the Black Zinc case has gone through all these tests, passed all the tests according to our requirements, which are the same requirements we set for all our cases. But then the bowl test, the pencil test, and now also the sweat test that we're going to get into later have become new standards that we always require also with our coated products. So after doing all these tests, we have the confidence that when we bring the product to the market, it will last a good time and you won't run into any issues. However, we received that first ticket from a customer that showed that the black coating peeled off the case. And that was like, how? Why? Those questions come up immediately because this is also one of the most scary type of issues. So the first response to this coming up from a single customer, to be very clear, of thousands of these cases already being sent out, is that probably it's related to a quality control issue. And the quality control meaning that every time we make one of these products, it goes through the whole process. In this specific case, with the Black Zinc case, you have the whole die casting of the zinc case. Then it gets CNC'd, it gets polished, it goes to e-coating, a specific nano black e-coating, and then it goes through a oven hardening the coating, and then we have our Black Zinc case. Now, when we say quality control issue, somewhere in one of these processes, something not have gone right, and maybe a whole batch of these cases have gone through this same process that did not go right, and we might have this issue occurring more frequently. So we went into the processes and we took a look at what is happening. Now, we couldn't find anything specifically going wrong on the quality control part. So then became the question, okay, how can we make sure that we can replicate the same issue with the case that the customer had experienced? We started doing two things. We made another test, which was the rubbing test, and we rubbed it at the exact same areas where these few customers encountered this issue. We did the same with a new test also, the artificial sweat test. Now, it was not exactly the same as the one I shown in the previous video or that we're using right now. It was more simple by just putting artificial sweat on these specific spots and then see if that would replicate it. Now, we found out that the rubbing test did not replicate or show similar signs of the problem that we've seen with the customer, but with the artificial sweat, it did. That moment, we decided the following thing was to create a more aggressive test, apply it more broadly with more products to see and learn more about what is the impact of sweat on the coating. At the same time, we also decided, and that's what the 6HE V2 update video is about, visit the vendors that do the coating, visit the vendors that do the material making, and then see what is causing that issue. Is it the coating that reacts or responds to the sweat? Or is it the material that reacts or responds to the sweat? The conclusion was it is the coating that is responding to the sweat. But then why is it not responding to everyone's sweat? Now that is a very interesting question. With the artificial sweat test, there's this one piece that you can make a difference in, is that if you're running outside or you're inside sweating, it will have a different composition. And also, more importantly, your diet. So based on what you eat, your sweat will contain different chemicals inside that you're exerting with your body. It's these things that also influence the component that we're testing, which is the pH value. pH stands for roughly the amount of acidity that's inside the sweat. So with the artificial sweat test, we took 2 different pH values, one that is a bit lower, about 4.5 to be exact, and one that is a bit higher, about 8.5. Now, usually a human has somewhere around the 4.7 to 5.7 pH, so we're taking basically 2 extremes. Now, we found out that it does have an impact on the durability of the coating, where the lower pH value will deteriorate that coating faster than the higher one. Now, what does that mean for us internally? At the moment, what is very, very important for us is that we can set a testing standard for this artificial sweat stuff that we can apply to all our coated products. And we haven't really set that standard yet because we're still running through comparison tests to understand also what should be the standard, what coatings have what impact, and what do we now also know in the field what is working. So that is a big impact internally so that we can have a better way to create better coatings for longer lasting products. But what does all of this mean if you have a Black Zinc case right now or you're planning to get one? Well, let's talk about that inside because my hand is getting numb and it's also getting more hot in here. There's air conditioning inside. It would be great to be inside. Let's go. So, of course, that was a little bit of editing magic. I took a break, but now we're inside. Let's talk. How many cases have now happened with this Black Zinc peeling issue? Just to create some perspective here. So when it just started, we just had like a handful, just 1-2 users. That was in the first about 5 months into shipping the case. And now we're getting to a point where it's still below 1%. And as long as that is the case, it means that it's very, very manageable. It's not something that we would say, let's make a proactive, sweeping change, just like we did with the white zinc V1. All the cases would have the same behavior with the gray marks, and we just wanted to remove that completely. That's how we got to the V2 case. In this case, it's not exactly the same. We're already shipping these cases actively to end users. People are actively using it, and there's only very few users that run into the problem. But that is not good enough, of course. We want to make sure that nobody runs into this problem and that never happens. We want to make sure the product lasts really, really long for everyone. If you do run into this problem, just to make that very clear, we make sure that if you reach out to customer service, you show the issue, we have a few options available. One of the options is also giving you a full refund on the case value of the ATHE because the keyboard itself works perfectly fine. Now, for everybody and for every individual, you'd want a different solution because everybody has a different opinion about what is good for them. Some people would just like that refund for the case itself and keep using the ATHE as it is. Other people would rather just have a new case that is that black color they want. And that is also where we run into that problem because we don't have that alternative case for those specific users. Because as I mentioned before, when we would send the same case again to the user, we would run into that same issue over and over again. Obviously, we can't send the same case because you run into the same problem. And that is the challenge. That is the part that we're really focused on. Can we get an alternative black case for that particular type of user? That's what we're actively developing right now. So what we've learned from the white zinc V1 and the V2 is that there's also another way of doing the coating. E-coating first, and then we spray paint over the e-coating. And that is a thicker coating, and that gives it a different feel, a slightly different look. But that does, from the tests that we have run now, specifically the artificial sweat test, create a better barrier of protection against this particular issue. It even does it better than an aluminum case that is anodized. Our idea here is that we're going to make an alternative black zinc case that is using that same method of e-coating it first, then spray painting it, and then we have a good alternative case for the people that do run into this issue. So this case will be available as soon as possible. We're working on it. We have about 3 to 6 months as an indicator right now. We think we can do it in 3 months, but we only want to communicate to you, expect 6 months. And we do that to be safe. But with these updates, I will carry you with me going through that process and update you adequately on when you can expect that alternative case. The alternative case coating is not going to be something that we're implementing on the ATHE Black Zinc case overall. And we do that deliberately because we don't want to change that product midways by doing such a sweeping change and getting a huge amount of logistic horrors of making these changes, because it doesn't make sense because of that defect rate being so low. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to use this alternative case coating as an experiment also for us to see if this is maybe the way we should be coating these products going forward with every other product. When we look at the 6-stage EV2, for example, I can tell you a little secret. We chose to go for extruding, CNCing, and anodizing, and not with the e-coating painting. And there's a good reason for that, because we want to take the least amount of risk that there is that we could run into any type of issue, even if it's the less than 1%, even if it's less than 0.5%, because this is a higher volume product. It is newly released, and the whole goal of the 6-stage EV2 in that metal case is that it lasts also a long time, and we don't know enough yet about the e-coating with painting and the time it's been on the market, but we do know quite a lot about anodizing aluminum products and time on the market, for example with the LMAs. However, we have made one big change with the Wooting ATHE Black Zinc case and fully assembled keyboard, and that's lowering down the production volumes and eventually not to keep producing it until we have also our new type of coating ready for mass production, that we feel confident that it can last for the time for not just the majority, but for everyone that gets this Black Zinc coated case. And the reason why we do that is because we want to reduce the liability of this becoming a prolonged issue that sticks around for a long time. And this is the smoothest way for us to transition into this. But this doesn't mean that suddenly there's going to be this V2 version available with that alternative coating out of nowhere. So that's not the approach we want to take here. We're only making the alternative coating now for the ATHE Black Zinc as the good alternative for the people that do run into the issue, because it is a different type of case, makes a different type of product, and we want to solve that particular issue with it. Well, that gives us a little bit more confidence also in what we're doing. It gives us a bit more time to do the developments and learn more. All right, to wrap it up, I hope you learned a lot from this update about the blistering issue. And again, if you do run into it, reach out to customer service. There's also a link in the description for this specific issue if you do run into it. And then you will be helped out immediately. And hopefully this gave you some insight. The next update on this topic will be when we get some results of testing the alternative coating, and this will be focused on those people that do run into the issue to know when that is available. And we're going to run out of the scene here. Yes, I am going to run out of the scene to close this. So bye-bye. See you in the next update.